Introduction to Ethical Theories. At the end of this podcast, you should
understand three basic normative ethical theories, understand the importance of reason and emotion in ethical decision-making.
A primer on ethical theories. Resources.
The following section of the podcast is taken from the following article, W. D. Solomon's 1995 article entitled Normative Ethics Theories, which appeared in the Encyclopedia of Bioethics, edited by W. T. Reich, and published by Simon, Schuster, and Macmillan. Students in Nursing 330 at University of Pennsylvania will also find similar information from this podcast in Chapter 26 of the so-called Green Book, Practical Ethics for Nurses and Nursing Students, by Catherine Schroeder. Let's examine the types of evaluative judgments that we make in ethics. The article that I mentioned by Solomon has a very good diagram, which we will reproduce for you here. In column 1, there is an agent performing some action, which is abbreviated as the P. In column 2, there's the action that the agent is performing, abbreviated by the arrow. And lastly, in column 3, are the consequences that result from the agent performing the action. Each consequence is represented by a plus sign, and since there are a multitude of consequences that may result from a particular action, you see several plus signs. The reason why this particular diagram is so illustrative is that by focusing on the particular elements of the diagram, we can derive three different types of ethical theories.
Evaluative Judgments.
Let's look now to the basic evaluative judgments we make in ethics. First, we like to talk about moral agents, persons who hopefully, after careful deliberation, perform some action. Typically, we ascribe certain virtues to agents. A very generic example would be, Jones is a very compassionate nurse. Here, compassion is the quality or virtue that Jones possesses. This is the hallmark of the first type of ethical theory, virtue theory. If we examine the second type of evaluative judgment, we will focus in on the actions. We evaluate the actions that a moral agent performs and use specific moral language to describe whether the actions were good or bad. We might say that certain actions are required, permitted, or forbidden. A nice example of this is Jones has a duty to tell his patient the truth about his diagnosis. Notice the language of duty, which suggests that a specific action is required. The evaluation of specific actions performed by a moral agent represents the second kind of ethical theory, deontology. Consequences. We can also evaluate those. A moral agent has performed some action, and we judge whether the action was good or bad based on what consequences result. Typically, the language that is used to describe consequences also has moral importance. An example that involves judgment of the ends or results of an action would be, health is more important than money. Many people would argue, no, money is more important than health, but that's actually putting the cart before the horse. It depends, of course, on what we value. Most reasonable people would see money as a means to other ends, not an end in and of itself. Achieving good health is an end in and of itself.
Three basic normative theories.
To review, if we separate the three components from the diagram and focus on evaluating that component as being most important for morality, we can derive three of the fundamental ethical theories. If we ascribe certain virtues to the agents who perform actions, and believe those virtues to determine the actions and the consequences that result from such actions, we would be virtue theorists. If we examine morality from the standpoint of what duties exist within moral relationships, we are focusing on the actions themselves. Virtues and consequences are less important. This is the fundamental basis for the ethical theory known as deontology. Lastly, if we care less about virtues and duties, but rather on the consequences of moral actions, then we would be consequentialists.